Hello. I will. How you guys doing? I hope you're doing well today. Well, I'm going to show you something very interesting that Mr. Dante had shown. I'm going to let him watch you this video, and this is going to confirm why they're trying to put a certain segment of people out of Israel. And I'm going to take you to the channel of Israel. But first, we're going to listen to Mr. Dante Forson, and he gives you the background of Jews and why they don't want the darker ones, what they're trying to do in Israel to this day. And this is something that really very, very interesting. But this is, I thought I put this together, and I just happened to think about this as I was going through my files. And so let's see what Mr. Forson.
Upon approaching the 18th green, Issa Tanaka silently proclaimed, "My brother may think he's a better golfer." That's just my life experience, but who I am, what makes me tick, the core of my being is that I'm a child of God through faith in Jesus Yeshua. And I welcome all others who are children of God through faith in Jesus Yeshua. And it could well be that there are as many as a couple 100,000 black Jews in America today. That could well be. But we're going to unpack this. We're going to look at this together. We're going to take some time. So sit back, enjoy this, stop and start the video as you need to, check references. And again, the desire is to glorify the Lord and pursue the truth. Okay, so let's just take a moment and start with Scripture. I want to read to you from Genesis chapter 10. Genesis chapter 10, this is the table of the nations that we have after the flood, beginning in verse 1, Ve'elu toldot b'nei Noach, Shem, Ham, v'Yafet, v'yoldu lahem banim achar hamabul. So these are the lines of Shem, Ham, and Yafet, the sons of Noach. Sons were born to them after the flood. Then it says b'nei Yafet were who? They're listed: Gomer, Magog, Madai, V'Yavan, V'Tuval, Meshech, V'Tiras. And the descendants of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Yavan, Tuval, Meshech, and Tiras. And then Uvenei Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphat, V'Togarma. And the descendants of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphat, and Togarma. So Ashkenaz is listed here as what? A descendant of not Shem, not the Semites, but Yafet. All right. Now, the question is, who's Ashkenaz? Does Ashkenaz in the Bible have anything to do with Ashkenazi Jews? Okay, so now that's like another reference to the same Ashkenaz, Jeremiah chapter 51, beginning in verse 27, starting with the Hebrew word Su'u Nes Ba'aretz, Tikush Shofar Ba'goyim. So raise a standard on the earth, sound a horn among the nations, appoint nations against her. This is the fall of Babylon. Assemble kingdoms against her, Ararat, Mini, and Ashkenaz. So this is a totally different group of people now. Right, this nation, this people called Ashkenaz, nothing to do with Israel, nothing to do with Jewish people. Well, who are they? If you will look at virtually every major Bible dictionary, Bible encyclopedia, here's what you'll find. I'm going to read to you, for example, from the Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary, one of the most respected Bible dictionaries, multi-volume. Who is Ashkenaz? Here's what you see. The first descendant of Gomer, who is the first offspring of Yafet in the table of nations. In Jeremiah 51:27, Ashkenaz appears along with Ararat and Mini as a kingdom called upon to oppose Babylon. The name is identified with the Neo-Assyrian Ishkuza, who appeared between the Black and Caspian Sea in the 8th and 7th centuries BC, driving out the Cimmerians. And it goes on, who are they then? For Herodotus, so a famous historian in time before Jesus, these people came to be called the Scythians or Scythians, right? We could read through the rest of that in detail, but this has nothing to do with Israel. This has nothing to do with the Jewish people. This has nothing to do with Ashkenazi Jews today. It was an ancient people called the Scythians or Scythians, and they leave society, they disappear. They're all gone a couple thousand years ago.
All right, Dr. Brown, you said a lot. I'm glad you brought up Herodotus. So this is going to take us into some strange places because you brought up Herodotus, and when you bring up Herodotus, Herodotus, as Dr. Kennedy is going to tell you. I'm going to play a short clip from Dr. Kennedy. If you want to live by Herodotus, you got to die by Herodotus. So after I play her video and what she has to say, it's actually a couple of clips, what she has to say about Herodotus, and then I'm going to show some interesting stuff. Now, you said that the Ashkenaz of the Bible was descended from Japheth. There we agree. And you said that they became the Scythians, and then they disappeared into history. So after I show you Dr. Kennedy's comments about Herodotus, I'm going to read something about Herodotus. I'm going to show another source, but I'm also going to show something interesting about the Scythians, impossible connection to the Ashkenazi Jews. See, people are out here talking, and so I'm going to show you who is doing the talking, and it's not just regular people. This is from a university conversation. So I will show that to you after I show the two videos of Dr. Kennedy talking about Herodotus. And this is going to tie into what you said earlier, that you and other people have looked and you just don't see a black Israel in the Bible. You don't see a black Israel in history, and you don't even believe that there are that many people. You believe there's less than 0.5% of black Americans that trace their origins to ancient Israel. So let's hear what Dr. Kennedy has to say.
You grew this kingdom. Keep it healthy.
Kennedy has to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for checking out the channel today, The Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages. As always, I am your host, and I want to welcome you back to Race, Ethnicity, in the Ancient Mediterranean World. Dr. Rebecca Futo Kennedy, thank you so much for coming back on today.
Happy to be here.
So now we are getting to Herodotus. Ian McLean asked, Herodotus claimed that the Colchians were of Egyptian stock, that they were of dark skin and woolly hair, they weaved their clothes in the Egyptian manner and practiced circumcision. He believed they were the remnant of the European expedition by Pharaoh Sesostris. Why did Herodotus make these comments? Is there any evidence for Egyptian genes in modern Georgia? And what reason would Herodotus have for making these peculiar observations if they were completely unfounded? I'm going to summarize that right now and be like, basically what he's asking, were the Colchians African?
Yeah, so I think the actual question is why this is a question. Really, first off, we're never going to actually find... First off, the Egyptians, of course, were African, and we have evidence from Herodotus and other sources that Africans tended to be black, that they were a range of colors that would constitute black today, and they were actually, the Greek words that are used for them is black. Sometimes they don't comment on color because the Egyptians had a range of skin colors. Some Egyptians looked just like Greeks, who, again, were also often called black. Why? Because men, if you're a man, in the Greek context, being called black-skinned is a sign of masculinity, and being outside and exercising in the nude in the gymnasium, the naked room, the naked place, as I often refer to the gymnasium, because that's what gymnos means. Gymnos means naked, if people don't know that. So when you go to the gym, you're going to the naked place, just so you know. The place where you should get naked. And so the question is, why is this a question? It's a question because of this heated debate over whether or not Egypt is, well, it's two debates. One is, are Egyptians black in our common contemporary context? But also, the other question is, are there quote-unquote people of color in the ancient world? And so this is the problem that we have, right? This sort of assertion that goes back to, it's a very long-standing practice, but it sort of gets encapsulated for me in a quotation from the famous classicist Bernard Knox. In the sort of response to the Black Athena debates, he wrote an essay, gave a talk titled, and then became a published essay called The Oldest Dead White European Males. And he says in it that, you know, of course the Greeks are not black. The Greeks are white, or rather actually they're really olive skin color. So you see the sort of problematics of actually equating skin color with whiteness when it doesn't actually work. The Greeks are not British or German. But that's the other problem, is that there's been a lot of effort by scholars since really, you know, Frank Snowden in his book Blacks in Antiquity to actually recognize and acknowledge that there are in fact black people who are not just part of the ancient Mediterranean, but are integral to and exist in the ancient Mediterranean, in the Greek world, in the Roman world. They are Roman citizens, they're Egyptians, they are members of the Egyptian hierarchies, they're pharaohs in Egypt, etc. And so that is actually often what the question is really, what's hiding behind that question is trying to show the ancient world as a white space when it is not a white space. It is a multicultural, multi-ethnic, and in our modern terminology, multiracial world. And this idea that we can then go and find quote-unquote Egyptian genes in Georgia is kind of funny, because what does it mean to have an Egyptian gene? Well, we decide what an Egyptian gene is based on partial reconstructions from like a handful of mummies, and we decide we modern scientists or modern geneticists decide these are the 5 markers out of the 30-some billion, alleles or whatever, however many millions there are. I think it's like 33 million alleles or something. That these 30 of them are going to be the ones that we decide makes them Egyptian. When Egyptian was a cultural designation, not a genetic designation. So how do we know where these things are going to pop up? We can't, and we can't actually use genes to make this decision. Herodotus describes a group of people called the Colchians as being black. And I would push, he doesn't say that they have dark skin and woolly hair. They say have black skin and kinky hair. Using woolly hair actually pretends that the word that he's using is the same word that's used for sheep, and it's not. Sheep's hair is not the word they use to describe people's hair. So we want to be careful. It's like tightly twisted, right, or kinky hair, not woolly hair. And it's not dark skin, it's black. And this is a word that is used of Ethiopians, of Egyptians, of Odysseus, and others.
All right, Dr. Kennedy said a lot in reference to Herodotus. He said that the Egyptians were black with kinky hair. And it was you, Dr. Brown, who brought Herodotus into this by referring to the publication from Yale. So now, here's something interesting. And this, I said, is going to get a little strange. Awkward, maybe. So Herodotus, right here, you'll see this is called let me see, the Kushites, Colchians, and Khazars, the Journal of Near Eastern Studies, Volume 18, Number 1, January of 1959. And I find it interesting that you say, oh, never mind, we'll come back to that in a second. We'll come back to this in a second. Now, my goal isn't to prove that you're Khazars. I'm just going to point something interesting out since you brought up Herodotus. And this is talking about those Colchians, the ones that were black that Herodotus referenced. And he said that the Colchians were related to the ancient Egyptians, or were actually ancient Egyptians, black ancient Egyptians. This is all going to tie together in a moment. And the reason this is important is because you don't see it in history, and you say that the people that you know don't see it either. And yet in the Bible, we see that Israel is mistaken for Egypt. Moses is mistaken for an Egyptian. All of Israel are mistaken for Egyptians when they mourn the death of Jacob. And later on, Paul is mistaken for an Egyptian. And we're not talking about these modern day Egyptians, because anybody who knows anything about history, just a basic understanding of history, tells you that there were the Greek invasion, the Roman invasion, and the Arab invasions, or the Arab conquest period, starting around the 7th century in the 600s AD. And it was the Arab conquest which shaped the visual of what we see today in the Middle East. You confirm this by checking any history book or checking any scholar. They will confirm that the Arab invasions is what led to the current look of the modern Middle East. Before that, it was dark. So now, I want to read something from, real quick, Herodotus. Or not from him, but this is from Patrick T. English. Again, Kushites, Colchians, and Khazars. I think it's interesting that you brought up Herodotus, and that there is a link from Herodotus to the Khazars, which you're going to say later that you guys are not Khazars. Okay, fine. If you're not Khazars, I'm just going to point out this interesting stuff. When Herodotus visited Colchis in Mingrelia in the 5th century BC, he found its people to be, as he described them, black-skinned and woolly haired. But as Dr. Kennedy said, he actually said kinky hair. It says, he described them black-skinned and woolly haired, that is seemingly of Negro type. So if you're going to accept Herodotus about the Scythians, you're going to have to accept Herodotus about the Colchis. It says they were, he says, circumcised. The Colchians, the Colchians or the Colchis, the Egyptians and the Ethiopians, he remarked, are the only races which from ancient times have practiced circumcision. The Phoenicians and the Syrians of Palestine, i.e. the Jews themselves, admit that they adopted the practice from Egypt. But that's not the part I want to point out. Now, they go through and they try to explain away black and saying, well, he may not have called them black because they were black. I find that interesting in history. Every time that black is referenced in Africa, of all places, and around Africa, that suddenly black doesn't mean black. And people try to explain away what black means, and you guys can go through. I'll leave a link to this. If you have a membership to J Store, you can read it. So now, here's the interesting part I want to get to in this article from 1959, because you say you don't see this. So now, my thing is, I'm big on historical consistency. You may not know that about me, but if all things are true, they should be historically consistent. When an anomaly pops up in history, then we have to ask questions. And what we find is that black Jews are not the anomaly. Black Jews are the norm. The anomaly are white Jews. And I'm going to show you guys something in a minute. Since you say that the Scythians were the descendants of Ashkenaz and that the modern Ashkenazi don't have anything to do with the Scythians. So now, right here, we're just going to read this real quick. This is page 52 on this source right here. It says, across the Caucasus, from Colchis and Abkhazia, the Khazar people ruled a wide empire between the 6th and 11th centuries AD. The Arab geographer Istakri, describing them, remarks that a section of the Khazars were brown or even black of skin. I've mentioned this before on my channel about the black Khazars, and I'm going to show you guys again in a second, as if they were a kind of Indians, not talking about Native Americans, but Indians from India. The nearest regions of India, however, are as far from Khazaria as from Lydia, and are inhabited by comparatively fair-skinned peoples, whereas Herodotus' black Colchians were, and the Abkhazia Negroes are, just across the mountains that were the southern defense of Khazaria's border. It is much easier to imagine that these black Khazars had moved over the Caucasus passes rather than from India on a 2,000-mile route over mountains and deserts and through organized kingdoms. The very name of the Khazars might well be derived from Khaz, if that was the root of the name Kolcho, Abkhazians, and ultimately from Cash. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because I'm going to read another source. This is from 1959. The Khazars had a double kingship, a secluded sacred ruler under the Turkish title of Kakin, or Kakwan, and a secular ruler and a war leader under the Turkish title of Beg. The Abasgoy, as the Greeks called the Abkhazians, had two kings. One was said to rule the east and one the west, but they are mentioned as a pair rather than as two independent sovereigns. The institution of a secluded and sacred king seems more African than Asian. Besides early Egypt, where the god was constrated with man, there are instances in West Africa, at Shark Point, Fernando Po, Benin, Luango, Onitsha, and elsewhere. Strabo mentions it in Ethiopia. See here, let me shrink this so I can actually read that. I can't pronounce them words, and Pontus in the ancient Anstodian Cash. Alright, let me enlarge it again. I'm not going to try to butcher all these names, and others. Negro kings were not allowed to go out to battle. The Khazars were believed to be proselytes to Judaism. But you guys say you're not Khazars. I'm just pointing out this information. The Khazars were believed to be proselytes to Judaism, but accounts are few and conflicting as to when or how they converted. One of these accounts is the so-called letter of Hasday. States that, give me a second, I'm going to read this letter for you guys interested in this Khazar information. Now, I want you guys to Google letter of Hasday. Now, remember, we just read that some of the Khazars, right here, a section of the Khazars were brown or even black of skin, as if they were a kind of Indians. They looked like Indians from India. Now, I'm saying historical consistency one more time. All right, Dr. Brown, I want you to listen closely, because I find a few interesting things in your statement, and the reason I'm reading all this is because it all goes together. I'm going to refer back to all of this when I wrap it up at the end. Our fathers have told us that in the beginning of their, or your settlement, the place was called Mount Seir. Who's associated with Mount Seir, Dr. Brown? Is it Esau? Now, I'm not saying any of this. This is from 1959. This is written in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies. So it says, I'm going to start over. Our fathers have told us that in the beginning of their, or your settlement, the place was called Mount Seir. But my Lord knows that Mount Seir is far from the place where he lives. Our elders say that formerly it was called Mount Seir, but persecutions prevailed, and they went out from affliction to affliction. These are Edomites, Esau. They're linking to the Khazars, till they got possession of the land where they now dwell. Also the old men of the former generation, who can be relied on, have told us how on account of their faithlessness a persecution was decreed, and an army of Chaldeans rose up in anger and wrath. They hid the books of the law and the holy scriptures in a cave, and for this reason they prayed in the cave. On account of the books they taught their sons to pray in the cave morning and evening, till the times were lengthened, and they forgot and no longer knew about the cave, why they were accustomed to pray therein. But they practiced the customs of their fathers without knowing why. And you say, it goes back to your father and your father and your father, as long as you can trace. Anyway, let's keep going. But you're not Khazar. You said you're not a Khazar. I'm going to accept your word for it. You're not a Khazar. But I'm just going to read this stuff about the Khazars. After a long time, there arose a man of Israel who was eager to know why. So a man of Israel is now in the presence of the Khazars. Remember that point. He entered the cave and found it full of books and brought them out from there. From that day they set themselves to learn the law. Thus have our fathers told us, as the earlier generation heard from one, the one from the other. The whole matter is very ancient. So the Khazars, some of them were black. Somehow there's a man of Israel among them. I just want you guys to hold on to that point. Alright, so now we have the one primeval language traced experimentally through ancient inscriptions in alphabetic, I'm not going to read all the rest of that, but here we go, Oxford University's 1854. So the other one was 1959, so this is 105 years prior to that. Now see, somebody somewhere got it in their head that there were Khazars, white ones, and that there were a sect of them that may have been black, and these black ones were living among the white ones, and somehow there is a Jew who asked them why did they do these things. So we know that the Khazars were in proximity to the Jews, or at least one Jew. But here, 105 years prior to that, we find another interesting reference to these black Khazars and who they were. Remember, I said historical consistency. So they have been described as black. The Khazars are described as black and looking like Indians from India. Alright, so now let's talk about these black Khazars. We're going to tie all this together. Right here, the black Jews, this is again one primeval language. To begin with the country of the Khazar, Tartars, to which the Israelites, with certainty, are known to have migrated. Now, most people will say, well, see, they went into Europe. That means that they are not black. But let's keep reading. and from whence it has been clearly shown they must have passed into Afghanistan and India. It is expressly stated by Ibn Hakl himself, an eyewitness of the fact, that there were two distinct branches or castes of the Khazars, or the Khazars. We all know that spelling changes over time. It's spelled Khazars in some places, Chozars in others. So I'm sure you know this, Dr. Brown. This is for everybody else. The one white and the other black. That's consistent, historically consistent with what we just read from 1959, 105 years prior. They're saying there's two distinct sects or parts of the Khazars, one white and one black. It says, now there in a region colonized by Israelite tribes is the very same phenomenon which is found at the present day in the black Jews and white Jews of Malabar. It's talking about India. And we're going to come back to Dr. Claudius Buchanan later on when you mentioned Columbus in 1492. We're going to come back to Claudius Buchanan, Reverend Claudius Buchanan, and the black and white Jews. Mr. Elphinstone's work supplies a fresh example of the same character and contrast in a case still more nearly in point, that of one of the tribes of Afghanistan, the Nasrs. So the Nasrs are important. In their persons, they are small, black, and ugly. This is important. He says the Nasrs are small, black, and ugly. Well, let's find out who they believe the Nasrs are. We find the Nasrs enjoying the same liberty with most other Afghans. Let me make this larger. There we go, Afghans. That the Nasrs are Afghans and therefore, like the black Jews, claim to be B'nai Israel, or son of Israel, I'm sure you know that, may safely be rested on their own strenuous assertions. So they have people from India who we haven't looked at yet. These guys are black like the Indians, and we have seen so far, well, we haven't got to the Limba yet, but we've seen the Igbo. The Igbo are black. We see that the Egyptians are described as black by Herodotus. And Herodotus led into us talking about the Khazars. We find out there are two sects of the Khazars, the black ones and the white ones. And now they have brought the Nasrs into it of Afghanistan. The contrast in countenance and color is the only difficulty. A difficulty certainly not to be set in the balance against the national tradition of any tribe of Afghan race, although Mr. Elphinstone himself has not escaped its influence upon his judgment, observing that though they speak Pashto and strenuously maintain their descent from the Afghans, their features and appearance certainly indicate a race distinct from that nation. But whatever changes time and climate conjoined may produce in national physiognomy, there is another cause of change far more powerful than both, which in the present question has been strangely overlooked. I mean intermarriages with other races. Now we know from the book of Nehemiah that such foreign alliances were not usual among the Jews after the captivity. I want to stress that point because later on you're going to make a point about intermixing, Dr. Brown, and there are multiple sources I've gone over before that basically the Jews and the Hamites mixed, the Israelites and the Hamites mixed, but we're going to see that the white Jews and the black Jews kind of stay separate in history. It says, and as Manasseh had become a Tartar horde seated, as we have seen in the country of the Khazars, so now they're saying Manasseh, they're talking about the tribe of Israel, is now in the country of the Khazars. It may justly be inferred that they indulged in a similar latitude, intermarrying with their female slaves or contracting marriages with the black Khazars mentioned by Ibn Hakl. So they're marrying the black Khazars, which is consistent with the Bible and what we see throughout other parts of history. In the Bible, they mixed with Hamites. We'll see from other sources that they mixed, when they went into Africa, they mixed with that native population. But I will point out that in the Bible, we do not see Israel mixing with Japheth. So let's keep going. The subject at large and the point in hand receive curious light from a single expression in the Cochin manuscript, whence it would appear both that the tribe of Manasseh had become tawny or black, and that this tribe had settled in Malabar and were the true ancestors of the black Jews. The expression in question is the tanned or sun-blacked Manasseh. It is introduced in connection with those most ancient Jewish records which are said to date from the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, that's important. It's said to date from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, and which were spoken of as belonging to the sun-blacked tribe of Manasseh. In this one allusion, in this one allusion, we have the parentage of the black Jews. Is it not possible that the black Nassers of Elephantstone may be the same stock, and that the name Nasser itself may be the corruption only of their patronymic Manasseh? So he's positing that the Nassers in Afghanistan are linked to the black tribe of Manasseh, which is living among the Khazars. And we just read from the 1959 reference that the Khazars at some point converted to Judaism. They were proselytes. But I know you say you're not Khazars. Now, I want to point this out because you're going to bring up Arthur Koestler and some other stuff. And I noticed that you didn't talk about any of these other references, because way before Koestler, here in the 1800s, we see that somebody got the idea that the Khazars were living, or Jews and Khazars were living together. This is 1854. So now let's go over here. We're going to establish historical consistency, because see, the Nassers were said to look like the Indians in India. And so now we have another reference. This is Anacalypsis. Let me see. This is by Godfrey Higgins. Let's see when this was written or published. This was published 1836. So this is published 18 years prior to this one. So Anacalypsis. I have formerly observed that I learned from Mr. Salome that the Lascars spoke Hebrew. Another Jewish friend met with two of the black Lascars from Malabar, that's India, Cochin in London, who were both Jews and spoke the Hebrew or Chaldee language. It's interesting that all these people are aware of black Jews in the 1800s with no internet. And you, Dr. Brown, said you and your friends in 2021, with the access to the internet that we have, you don't see any of this. But you guys can go on and read this. I'm not going to read all of this. It gets into the proselytes, but the whole point is he refers to the Lascars, and Lascars are a people which we can look up. And these are the Lascars of the East India Company. These are the Lascars right here. These don't look like white Jews to me. You said that you did not see the cookies. Or you said that you did not see these black Jews. So I'm going to go ahead and cut to the next part, and then I'm going to tie all this together.
Now, I'm about to show you something. What they're doing in present-day Israel now.
Spectrum Business is made to work for small
This
business,
kind of
made to overcommit and overcome,
whitewash.
made to log in and ship out,
That's why they
and
want to
made
get
to
rid
do
of
it all
these
with
people.
fast, easy-to-use internet, phone, and mobile services that work as hard as you.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for Eritrean immigrants to be deported immediately. He held a meeting to discuss measures against those who participated in a recent violent clash in Tel Aviv. He also said that this has crossed the red line, and he called for an emergency meeting over the altercation. Watch this clip of him discussing the Eritrean immigrants.
What happened yesterday across the red line? It's a riot. It's bloodshed. These are riots we cannot accept. Therefore, the first thing I do is to wish recovery to the police officers who were injured during the attempts to restore order. We ask for strong measures against the rioters, including the immediate deportation of those who took part in it. I have had a hard time understanding why we would have a problem with those who declare themselves to be supporters of the Eritrean regime, so they certainly cannot make a claim to be refugees. I also request that this forum will prepare and complete an updated plan for removal of all illegal infiltrators from the State of Israel, and this is the purpose of this gathering today.
Clearly, it got very violent, and allegedly, the violence or the altercation is between Eritreans that support the government and Eritreans that don't support the government. Not Israeli government, but the Eritrean government. So that was what the fight was about, and unfortunately a lot of people got hurt during this fight. And honestly, a lot of people are finding it hard to understand why this happened, and Israeli Prime Minister also said this. Why are the people that were fighting with the ones that don't support the government fighting in Israel and asking for asylum? Clearly they supported the government. That is why a lot of speculation came about, and people were saying these were plans, and they don't believe that those were actual Eritreans fighting. Not necessarily all of them are not Eritreans, but the ones that started the fight, they believe that they were planted by someone in order to stir the pot, and now they will be deported, because it's giving the government a good reason for them to do whatever they want to do, because they've been talking about immigrants for a while now, not just Eritrean immigrants but also Ethiopian immigrants. And some people believe that there's a lot going on there with racism and with the treatment that they get with police. Like they've even protested a while back on police brutality. So it's just bizarre to watch this fight, like Eritreans in Israel fighting one another. But anyways, fam, we'll update you once we get more information on this. I am Wangil Zalalam. I'll see you on the next one.
It is often said that color and race shouldn't matter. If that were true, why did Europeans deceptively change the images of historically black people to white? If color and race didn't matter, one must ask, why then was the history of black people whitewashed? Hollywood always cast ancient biblical characters as white. This deception programs the viewer to envision white people when reading scripture. During the Renaissance period, a huge makeover of history took place with a paintbrush and a lie. Laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen hath sought to paint the likeness of their images. For thy sanctuary is trodden down and profaned, and thy priests are in heaviness and brought low. 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 48 and 51.
Today, there are only 66 books in the Bible. The late 19th century 1611 King James Version Bible, used by clergy and church members, contained 80 books. Who removed the other 14 books, known as the Apocrypha, out of the original Bible? There are several passages in the Bible that mention books not included, such as the book of Jasher. 2 Samuel chapter 1 verses 17 to 18 in the King James Version. And David lamented with his lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan his son. Also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. The book of Jasher is mentioned in the Bible, but the book itself was not included. There are actually hundreds of scriptures and transcripts that were found and not added to the Bible. This was done by the same people that changed and distorted history. Why? Did they have something to hide? The Book of Enoch contains some very interesting information in which many Christians are not familiar with. Western scholars believe that the Book of the Watchers, which is contained in the Book of Enoch, date from about 300 BC, and the latest portion, the Book of Parables, was probably composed at the end of the 1st century BC. This pretty much validates the book. Not to mention the Tertullian, 160 to 230 CE, even called the Book of Enoch Holy Scripture. The Ethiopic Church even added the Book of Enoch to its official Bible. It is wholly extant only in the Ge'ez language, with Aramaic fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls and a few Greek and Latin fragments. This information alone has proven the authenticity of the Book of Enoch.
It's generally taught in the churches today that Noah's 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, represent 3 groups of people. Ham, the black man, Japheth, the white man, and Shem, everyone in between. If you look a little closer in the scriptures, you'll see that it reveals the truth about those 3 boys.
And after some days, my son Methuselah took a wife for his son Lamech. And she became pregnant by him and bore a son. And his body was white as snow and red as the blooming of a rose. And the hair of his head and his long locks were white as wool, and his eyes beautiful. And when he opened his eyes, he lighted up the whole house like the sun, and the whole house was very bright. And thereupon he arose in the hands of the midwife, opened his mouth, and conversed with the Lord of righteousness. And his father Lamech was afraid of him, and fled, and came to his father Methuselah. And he said unto him, I have begotten a strange son, diverse from and unlike man, and resembling the sons of the God of heaven. And his nature is different, and he is not like us. And his eyes are as the rays of the sun, and his countenance is glorious. And it seems to me that he is not sprung from me, but from the angels. And I fear that in his days a wonder may be wrought on the earth. And now, my father, I am here to petition thee, and implore thee, that thou mayest go to Enoch our father, and learn from him the truth, for his dwelling place is amongst the angels.
If a black couple has an albino child today, is that child considered black or white? We all know that they're still considered black even with the presence of white skin. This albino offspring is still capable of producing children with normal brown skin. This was the case of Noah. Noah was a black albino man with a black wife and had black children, and we will prove this. Notice how Noah's father Lamech responded to him at his birth. He responded in abject fear. He wondered why his son's skin was white. He questioned if he was the child of angels, and doubted that he even belonged to him. His concern was that his son looked nothing like him or his wife. Now if Lamech himself or his wife were white, why would they be surprised at the appearance of their son? The fact that Noah had black parents gives you an indication that he himself was not a white child, as in European, but an albino. This image is a prime example of the case of Noah, an albino dad with a black wife and 3 normal-looking children. Albino does not equate to European. Ham, the father of Mizraim, also known as Egypt, and Shem, the father of the Hebrews, more importantly the children of Israel, all look the same in appearance. Even Zondervan's Bible Dictionary prints the following. Ham is the father of the dark races, Africans, but not the Negroes. So then who is the father of the Negroes? Shem or Japheth?
Description of the Hebrews. The walls of Egypt gave a description of the people that lived there, and since the children of Israel were slaves there for more than 100 years, wouldn't there be images of the true Israelites on the walls? But how do we know what they looked like, and what did they wear? If we look closely at the scriptures, we can see with our own eyes what they must have looked like. In Amos chapter 9:7, it says,
Are ye not as children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel, saith the Lord? Have not I brought up Israel out of the land of Egypt?
The children of Israel resembled the Ethiopians, which are actually Cushites, descendants of Ham's son Cush. Europeans refer to them as Nubians. Let's compare the description of the Israelites in the scriptures with the images of the so-called Nubians on the walls of Egypt. The Israelite men and women wore golden earrings as recorded in Exodus chapter 32, verses 2 to 3.
And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods which shall go before us, for as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me.
The Israelite priest, which were men, wore bonnets upon their heads, a cap as hemispherical, as recorded in Leviticus 8:13.
And Moses brought Aaron's sons and put coats upon them, and girded them with girdles, and put bonnets upon them, as the Lord commanded Moses.
The Israelites wore fringes upon their garments, as recorded in Numbers 15:37 to 38.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations.
The Israelite priest, which were men, wore a scarlet color, red girdle. The Hebrew word for girdle is abnate, which means a belt. Hebrew dictionary, belted, girded with, as recorded in Exodus 39:29.
And a girdle of fine twined linen, and blue, and purple, and scarlet, of needlework, as the Lord commanded Moses.
The Apostle Paul even wore a girdle, as recorded in Acts 21:11. They were a dark-skinned people. Scriptures describe Yeshua, the one known to the world as Jesus. It mentions that he had skin like brass in the King James Bible.
And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters.
This is what the translators want you to believe. But if you do your research, you'll see that this was not true. The actual Greek and Hebrew word means burnished copper, but the Strong's Greek translation says whiteness, which is a deceptive translation. Have you ever seen a white-looking burned penny? What are they really trying to say? That the Messiah was white? The actual meaning was brightness, like the shine of a copper coin. Notice brass is more yellow-looking, whereas copper has a more bronze appearance. Why did white translators interpret burnished copper as the whiteness of brass instead of the brightness of brass or the shine? It's also worthy to mention that the Messiah's hair was like wool, and his feet looked as if they burned in a furnace, as recorded in Revelation 1:16. When Paul was giving instructions to Timothy about the apparel of the women, he said that the women shouldn't wear braided hair, as recorded in 1 Timothy 2:9. The scripture also mentions that Samson, Solomon, the Levite priest, Samuel, and Joshua, known to the world as Jesus, all have locks of hair on their heads.
Let's first look at Joseph. His brothers sold him to the Egyptians, and years later when the famine came, his brothers didn't recognize Joseph the Hebrew. He was mistaken as a natural-born Egyptian, Mizraim of the seed of Ham, a black man. If Joseph was white, he would have stood out among the Egyptians. Let's not forget, Egypt is Mizraim, the son of Ham. Moses also was mistaken for an Egyptian. Think about it. When Moses was born, Pharaoh sent orders to kill every Hebrew son that was born. But you know the story. Moses' mother put him in an ark, and Pharaoh's daughter found him and raised him as her own child right under Pharaoh's nose. Now you know if Moses did not look like the Egyptians, then Pharaoh would have killed that young boy. Moses could have actually become Pharaoh if he continued to be called the grandson of a Pharaoh. The Hebrews and the Egyptians look just alike. As a matter of fact, Moses was mistaken for an Egyptian by the daughters of the Midian priests. They said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and drew water enough for us. The names were changed in the Bible to hide the true identity of the people. Had the scriptures referred to Moses said a Mizraimian or a Hamite delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, then everyone would have known that Moses was black. Paul was even mistaken as an Egyptian or a descendant of Ham. Another point I want to bring out is that Yeshua, the one that everyone refers to as Jesus, was not the same nationally as the religious leaders in Jerusalem. Yeshua was from the bloodline of Yehuda or Judah. When you look at the origin of the word Jew, we have Yehuda, which means Judah, pertaining to Judah. Now you know Judah, along with the other 11 tribes of Israel, were in bondage in Egypt. It's recorded in the book of Exodus. The story of the 10 Commandments and how Yah delivered them from bondage of the Egyptians. Well, how is it that we have these so-called Jews in this passage saying that they were never in bondage?
Then said Jesus to those Jews which believed on him, If ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, We be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, ye shall be made free?
Did you get that? Did you hear that? They said they were never in bondage. Well, if they were of the seed of Jacob, they couldn't make that statement. Well, that's because they were Jewish converts. They were proselytes, Edomites, descendants of Esau. Notice that they told Yahshua that they were of the seed of Abraham, and Yahshua agreed with them. Indeed, that they were of the seed of Abraham. That's because they were descendants of Jacob's brother Esau.
Abonna bla Ibrahim ala kaba memara mala Islama dona Isau doso karak mala Yoko bakoroke
Herod the king was an Edomite. The Herods were an Edomite family that ruled Israel during the time of Yahshua's earthly ministry. The Jewish council, called the Sanhedrin, was under the authority of the Herods, who were in turn under the authority of the Roman emperor.
There you have it. There you have it right there. And I brought this out to show a bonnet. There you have it. And I got this right before the Jewish store closed here in Ohio. A Jewish store. So there's the fact right there. So they did technically, they were right. They whitewashed it. And it's whitewashed. And now this is coming forth. But color doesn't matter now. Now that the truth is out, color doesn't matter. But it doesn't matter unless an image have to paint the story. That's what it matters. They don't want to paint the true image because it would change the whole paradigm of what the Bible really was about. That's the truth. And that's this. And the reason why I showed this, even though that was some that political stuff, because there were people. You heard the president Israeli president said that he's trying to get them out. And not only that, he even tried to reduce the Ethiopian population. The descendants of the Ethiopians who are from ones are in the Bible. They're in Israel till this day, try to reduce their population. Then the Gentiles. The president of Israel are the Gentiles. He even said it. He tried, with sterilization. Because just like the days of Egypt, if you have so many, they're going to pose a threat. That's why in present-day Israel, they kind of pushed out the Eritreans, some Eritreans, Sudanese. And then the ones who left America back 50 years ago, they're trying to put them out, trying to take their land back. You know about that one? That were part of it. But they settled over in Israel. They trying to put them out. They trying to whitewash for the next. What I'm saying is they trying for the next 100 years so it can look like the movies. But it looked like the movie to tell their story, like Dante. But you heard what Dante said. The proof is right there. You can't erase that history. He had to bring out the actual history. See how it all ties in? See, even over when it came to Egypt, They don't want to admit that to this day. Because remember, everything's on a totem pole. But yet, one of the resources of these other places, where do they go to and try to make friends with and set up their business with? Where's Israel and Egypt? I bet you they come down into West African countries. But we not and get their resources just like the other nations do. It's funny, and I bet you that they have some business with some of them African countries. That's why they want to be part of the African Union. Want to know about the African Union? This all ties in. And do you know is that when they actually found they went to South Africa and they found the original ones in Africa and on Pastor Kelly's We Woke channel. Catch what that Jewish man said to him. And they were actually black Jews in South Africa. There are black Jews in Ethiopia. There are black Jews in Nigeria. But they don't want to acknowledge them. And if they do, if it was something holy, the proselyte would come in and try to replace them. And retell the history and wipe that out. But see, they ain't going to do that. I would doubt they try to do it with the Ethiopians. To make it look and repaint like they do over in Egypt. That's how I said this thing is deep. This thing is deep. That's how the totem pole of race is. Even among the Bible. That they even want to try to take the darker people out of the Bible. And repaint it even in the tombs in Egypt. And they show pictures of them lighting up their skin. They want to tell it from their point of view. And make the blacks seem like they were all Hamites. You see? So they can tell that tale for the next 100 years. They're trying to change history. That's how deep this thing is. That's how deep they're trying to change history. You can't change history. And the writers had to pull it out. These scholars that Dante had to pull it out, that prove the actual writing. But race doesn't matter. Color doesn't matter. Really. Why don't they tell it from the Bible point of view, the actual Bible? Why don't they paint what the people look like? Paul, Noah. They won't. They got to keep up the narrative. That's how deep race is. That they were brought over from different parts of Europe to play Europeans, to play people that was in during the time, and you know it was impossible to be for 50 generations out there under a sun. All you have to do is use common sense. Look at the demographic of people. They couldn't survive that heat. That's how deep this thing is. That's how deep race is, even among God's people. That's why Sunday has always been a segregated day for Christians. And for other religions too. That's tied into this. They're called Judaism, Islam. That's why. Because subconsciously, race matters. But it's covered up. Go to the people's lands, and you find it for yourself. What the ones that worship in Islam, Judaism, and Christian. Tell me race don't matter. And even Hinduism. Tell me race don't matter. It matters. Subconsciously, because white supremacy is global and spiritual. And they try to tell it from their point of view, narrate it. That even the darker races will have some subconscious darkness about themselves. to be like them. The warfare is up here. That's why you have a lot of people bleaching their skin. They hit you right in your spirit. It's deep, ain't it? Don't believe me? Ask God himself. He'll tell you. He'll show you. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. And to President Israel whitewashing again. That's why I showed the second video. It is what it is. Alright then. You have to see the current time. That's why I showed you a short version. Alright then. The lesson. Till next time. Enjoy yourself. Be blessed. Stay tight. And let the Spirit of God reveal truth as a coming time will be revealed. Take care. Be blessed. See you on the next video. Like and subscribe.